live. For anyone who's listening in, please let us know if you can hear us and see us all right. We're just going to wait for the next 5 to 10 minutes as people come in. All right. So far we've got 2 people watching. For those of you that are watching, please open up the chat on the live webinar page and just say hi. Let us know where you're watching from. We are live on Facebook and we are live on YouTube as well, depending on which platform you're logging in from. So if you're on Facebook, you can make a comment on the live there and we'll be able to see it, and same goes for YouTube. Just make a comment to the live video. And if not, just open up the live chat that is on the live webinar page that we sent to you via email, and that's the best place for us to get in contact. All right. So we'll wait just a few more minutes here as people seem to be logging in through Facebook. We see now. All right, people are starting to come in. So for those of you who just came in, please let us know where you're watching from, what your name is, what you're most excited about for this live Q&A. I'm just making sure we're all good here on both Facebook and YouTube. All right. Just a couple of more minutes, everyone, and then we'll kick this off.
If you can, do try to get into that chat and tell us who you are, where you're from, because it's going to be the only way that you get to ask live questions. So do jump into that chat if you can. For sure.
All right. Looks like we got someone here. Let's see. Who here has joined a webinar on ADHD before? Let us know in the chat as well. Okay, so I think we're going to go ahead and get started. You know, we can always loop people in later So for now, I would just like to say welcome to everyone who's now watching. Yeah, let's get this started. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. Let me know, everyone, if you can see my screen. All right. So we've got this presentation up for you. All right. So we've got Katrina from the NYC area who's listening in. She's generally interested in providing parents with information on how to best serve their kids who may have ADHD, and she's excited to hear more about this topic. Welcome, Katrina. All right. So, welcome to the ADHD in Middle School Summit live Q&A webinar with me, Adrien Harrison, and Mr. Daniel Kramarsky, our fellow ADHD expert for today. We've got a very exciting presentation for you, as well as the opportunity to ask any questions that you have in the chat. You can access that either by commenting directly on our Facebook Live or on our YouTube Live, or if you're watching on the live webinar page that was sent to you via email, there is a big blue button to open the live chat there. So there's plenty of opportunities to interact with us today. That's what this is for. Mainly, there are three things that we're going to be talking about today, and that is we're going to be going over the biggest takeaways from the ADHD in Middle School Summit. So if you already watched that, great. It's definitely a massive resource with over 20 experts on ADHD, each with their own master classes teaching something very specific to the middle school years. And so we're going to be sharing some of the biggest takeaways from that. Also, we have a presentation from Mr. Daniel Kramarsky, who's going to be talking about how to get the school as well as your child's homeroom teacher on your side. And then we have a very big surprise offer for all of you that stay until the end of this webinar. So there's definitely incentive to stay all the way till the end. And as I pull up my notes here, we can start walking you through what we're going to be covering. So if you haven't met either me or Mr. Daniel Kramarsky yet, here's a quick little background about us. So we're going to be covering how to help your child with ADHD thrive through the middle school years. So who am I? My name is Adrien Harrison. I am the founder of smartcourse.io, which is an education technology company specifically building online courses for parents, teachers, and other caregivers of kids with learning differences, and help those caregivers help their kids thrive through school. So one of our biggest projects, our first project, is the ADHD in middle school years. And we hosted the ADHD in Middle School Summit, which I mentioned has over 20 world-class experts on ADHD that shared their individual tips, strategies that they've used and seen work with families that are struggling to cope with ADHD through the middle school years. We've also launched an ADHD in Middle School online course for which Mr. Daniel Kramarsky is the lead instructor. So a little bit more about me specifically. I've been featured in Forbes, Shapers Connectors Club, RTVI, I've spoken at WeWork, Freelancers Union, and many more. Growing up, I was a marginalized student. I was always getting into trouble at school because I would ask too many questions, or I saw a different way of doing things, and instead of teachers buying into that, they would want to do it their own way, and so we butted heads a lot. And what ended up happening is I would get sent to my dean's office very regularly throughout my middle school years, and that dean happened to be Mr. Daniel Kramarsky. And so when I'd be sent there, first of all, I was expecting for him to be angry and yell at me for getting in trouble. But instead, he took a very open approach to listen to where I was coming from. And we had very interesting conversations about what education should look like at scale, why kids with ADHD or any other type of learning difference are the least able to get access to equal opportunity in school. And throughout the years, we talked more and more about how we can solve that problem. And so that's how Smart Course was born. And now why we decided to create these resources specifically for parents, teachers, and other caregivers of kids with ADHD. So that's our mission. We want to empower those people to help students with ADHD thrive through the middle school years, both in school and at home, since we know that tons of the issues that come with coping with ADHD are not necessarily just in school. There's also a lot of issues with the family, particularly marriage, as we know that the divorce rate for parents of kids with ADHD is twice as high as that of neurotypical parents or neurotypical kids, just because of the amount of friction that's caused through coping with ADHD. So why do we want to help you with this? Because we want to make sure that all kids get access to equal opportunity, a solid education, and a chance to thrive. So joining me today is Mr. Daniel Kramarsky. So who is that? Daniel is a teacher, administrator, and parent with ADHD and over 30-year career in education. He's taught teachers at Columbia University, Teachers College. He's presented his work internationally at conferences on ethics and philosophy of education. He and his daughter, now a student at a top-notch university, both have ADHD, so he knows the ins and outs of how that feels, what it's like to be a parent, as well as a school administrator. He is the lead instructor for our upcoming course on ADHD in middle school, and he is an insider with expertise on what happens in schools and for families impacted by ADHD. Today, he will be teaching you the most important things you need to know about ADHD during the middle school years and how to handle the toughest challenges that you will face. So, when I first started learning about ADHD, I did what anyone else would do, and I started Googling some resources. And one of the things that came up was joining Facebook groups. Unfortunately, that was a complete nightmare because what I found was there were so many Facebook groups that had tons and tons of parents who were writing these incredibly long posts that were mainly complaining and not giving any help at all. As you can see, I have some of them up here on the screen. And what you realize is that, you'd think because these groups are posing as these support groups, they're going to be helpful, they're actually going to have constructive feedback from other parents who've been through the same situations that you've been through, and that you're going to get some actionable strategies out of it so that you can change your situation and your child's situation. And instead, it was a really harsh reality to realize that these were actually not helpful at all. The online resources are very hard to find if there's good ones, right? The good ones are very hard to find. And the other ones are either full of misinformation or just not actionable. So at the end of the day, you could run through so many of these resources and just not have any kind of positive impact at all. Dan, tell us a little bit from your perspective, because I know you had the same experience. What is it like for you as an expert joining these Facebook groups, and why were they not as helpful as you'd originally thought?
Well, Adrian, what happens in these groups is that people who have children with ADHD or who have themselves ADHD, adult ADHD, are venting. They're largely venting, and it's really interesting because to a certain extent that's totally legitimate and it's totally okay to vent in a Facebook group or say I'm at my wit's end here. I have no idea what to do here. And then and the best response to that comes from these other parents is we hear you, we feel your pain, we get it. We are a support group because we too have no idea what to do. But there's very few people who are responding there by saying, this is, in fact, what you can do in that situation, and here is the evidentiary background to show why that will work, or why that will work 20% of the time, or why that will work 80% of the time. So you have very, very few people on there who are working experts in ADHD or who've worked professionally with hundreds of kids with ADHD and can say, yeah, this is probably going to work or this isn't. So you get somebody who says, vents tremendously about a terrible temper tantrum that their child has had. And the best that you get from the support groups, which isn't a bad thing, by the way, it really isn't, is we feel that too. It's normal for a kid who has ADHD to do this. And then the parent is somewhat relieved because at least they have the understanding that they're going through a normal situation and that they're not because with 10% of kids having ADHD these days, that's a very large number of children. But what they don't get is authoritative advice that says, this is what you can do, this doesn't work, and this does. That last piece is very important. A lot of these people are saying, like, should I try this? And it's something that has been proven not to work time and time again. But, everybody would like it to work. So they say, oh, yeah, we tried that, and we seem to have had some success. Might have been a placebo effect or whatever. So it's not a bad place to be if you want someone to listen to you, but and support you in saying you're having a terrible time, so am I. Which is a valid thing to want, but it's not a good place to go for authoritative answers to your questions.
Right. So tell us, Dan, actually as well, when you started parenting your daughter, what was that like? What did you struggle with originally?
Well, I have twin daughters, and one of them has ADHD. And I would say that the first thing that we noticed was an expressive language difficulty. Now, I've been in schools, by the time I had my daughters, I had been in schools for over 15 years, and I knew what to look for. So when my daughter was 2, we saw an expressive language difficulty. We went to the person in charge of specialized services at our school, and he said, I don't see anything. And he never got back to us. So we got totally blown off. And it was up to, if I hadn't been an expert at that time, I think I probably would have just let it go for many years. But instead, we took our child to one of the experts that you're going to hear from in the course, Dr. Conchetta Dicaria, and had her tested, and we managed to muddle through. I've made tons of mistakes, and I've learned this from experience, which is, by the way, how ADHD kids learn things is by doing them wrong and getting kicked in the teeth, and then saying, okay, fine, we'll try it this way, and trying it again. They are tremendously resilient kids, most of them. So that's how it got started. And now I've been doing this experiment for 19 years in my house of twins, one of whom has ADHD and one of whom doesn't, and it's very interesting to see how that works.
So something that I think is important for everyone to understand here is, you can go through Facebook groups, you can find blog posts online, you can join free webinars, all you want. But at the end of the day, if you're not getting a positive impact or you're not changing your situation, it's useless. And so the one thing that I want you to understand, just like Dan explained, is the second you meet a legitimate expert and they actually change your mind on how you should approach something or give you legitimate expert vetted resources that you can trust, that's when things change for me. So let me tell you a little bit about some of the experts that I've met that completely changed my perspective on ADHD, and everything that I knew about it was revolutionized after that. So a lot of you probably know some of these people. In the top left here, we've got Dr. Edward Ned Hallowell. He's probably the most known name in the field of ADHD, period. He's written over 20 New York Times best-selling books, specifically on ADHD. Next to him, we have Elaine Taylor-Klaus and Diane Dempster. They're the co-founders of ImpactADHD.com. It is the most, if not one of the most successful ADHD blogs out there. Next to them, we have Dr. Peg Dawson, also New York Times bestselling author of many books on ADHD, complete leader and revolutionary in the field of executive function. Next to her, we have
fabulous presentation that she gave on the seminar. By the way.
Absolutely fabulous. She was so on top of everything. She's just very, very sharp. She just knows. I mean, she's been in the field for years and years and years. She knows literally anything and everything about executive functions, and especially how they relate to kids with ADHD. Next to her, we have Melissa Orlov, the world-leading expert on ADHD relationships, how ADHD impacts relationships. That's both within a marriage, parent-child relationships, with the siblings. So she has also a huge body of work, best-selling books, founder of ADHDmarriage.com, the largest blog about ADHD marriage, and she's one of the instructors for our online course as well. Next to that, we have Cindy Goldrich, founder of PTScoaching.com, been around forever, really on top of executive functions, gave an amazing talk at the summit about dealing with particularly defiant or difficult kids with ADHD. Next to that, we have Caroline Mcguire, huge in the space right now, just launched her latest book, Why Will No One Play With Me? She's a social skills coach for kids with ADHD, and I've seen her work. I mean, she's shown us videos. I've seen her work one-on-one with families. She's so in tune to all the subtleties that kids will give off that are tells that, you know, they're uncomfortable about this type of social interaction, or they're shy about this, or they don't feel comfortable talking about that, or they feel this way when they, hear a slur about ADHD, anything like that. So I know tons of parents suffer with social skills. She's an amazing resource to go to for that. Next, we have Dr. Conchetta DiCaria, a legendary clinical neuropsychologist in the field of ADHD, who's been running hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of diagnostics for kids with ADHD, to also rule out any other kind of comorbid disorders like anxiety or depression or ODD or anything that could be confused for ADHD that largely is, especially if you don't know what you're doing and why it's so important to get a legitimate diagnosis. Next to her, Leslie Josell. She is an award-winning ADHD coach. She's created the ADHD homework profile as well as the time management planner, which has helped hundreds, if not thousands, of families around the U.S. to help their kids get their homework done correctly, on time, and without friction. So this is just like a very small snippet of the experts that I've now interacted with and that have completely revolutionized my understanding of ADHD, especially during the middle school years. So the reason I share that with you is because, you can imagine all of these people plus, 20 more that have their own sets of expertise, specialized specifically zeroing in on an issue that kids with ADHD face, is like accelerating your learning about what these kids struggle with on a daily basis so much faster than if you were to search for blog posts or go through Facebook groups or whatever. I mean, the transformation is exponential. It's not even comparable. So after meeting all of these people and learning everything that I could about ADHD, especially during the middle school years, I learned more than I ever could have through years and years of research alone. That's the point I want to get across. So, what is the ADHD Middle School Summit? It is an online resource that we put together with over 20 experts on ADHD that taught step by step how to help your child thrive through the middle school years, both academically and at home, even if you were starting from scratch, right? We know that 64% of parents say that their child's school doesn't provide any information on learning disabilities. 66% of parents of children with learning disabilities are struggling with or conflicted about their ability to help their child. And we brought together the best ADHD experts in the entire world to teach you everything that they know about dealing with ADHD and making it a positive experience. And it was completely free from January 20th to the 24th. We've had amazing feedback from this summit. I mean, I get emails every day, at least 5, from people saying just how much they're thankful for having put something together like this, that they had seen tons of webinars online and nothing compared to this, it was by far the best thing that they've ever come across. So super happy about that. And it just goes to show the amount of transformation and value that people can get from resources that are actually vetted by tons of experts teaching the best of what they have to offer. So here's Elaine Taylor-Klaus. Like I said, she's one of the founders of one of the, if not the most popular blog on ADHD ever. She said, when you get the world's leading thought leaders on kids, school, and ADHD in one place, the results are magnifying. When you target the conversation on middle schoolers, the conversations are both practical and socially/emotionally impactful. And when you add in an excellent interviewer like Adrien Harrison, you have a recipe for a particularly excellent online summit. This one's worth catching for sure. Getting an endorsement from someone like this is huge. And I was so happy that she was so happy with the summit. Next, we had Leslie Josell, also endorsing the summit, saying, as an ADHD coach for students who also provides coaching for parents, I hear all day long how frustrated and confused parents are when it comes to navigating the middle school years with children with ADHD. They are looking for real guidance, real strategies, and real answers. This summit provides that and more with its top-notch speakers. Attendees are going to get all the guidance and support they need, and I'm thrilled to be a small part of it. Again, another world leader in the field of ADHD endorsing this summit because the value is just so clear. So what's the ADHD in middle school online course? It's basically a next step up from the summit, right? So one thing that a lot of parents struggle with is getting an ADHD diagnosis. One is getting school accommodations in place for your child. One is understanding how your child's ADHD brain works so that you actually understand, like, oh, this is what's happening for my child right now. This is why they're acting irrationally to you. Or this is why they're throwing this tantrum right now. So all of those kinds of things are super important for parents to understand. Understanding how your marriage is affecting your child and how you can fix your marriage so that it's not as conflict-ridden as it was before you were dealing with all these issues. And lastly, getting an understanding of what is the best way to parent, not only at home, but also from the school's perspective. How should you as a parent approach the school? How do you interact with the teachers? How do you interact with the school administrators? And that's something that Dan Kramarsky teaches in the course. So we put together this online course, which is by far the #1 most comprehensive walkthrough guide ever that I've ever seen in the field of ADHD. And that's because we combined the 20 plus ADHD master classes that went on for the summit and 5 in-depth walkthrough lessons from individual experts that were much, much more in-depth. For the summit, we would have sessions that would last 45 minutes to 2 hours. For the courses, they last minimum 3 hours and some going, over 10. So, the amount of information that we share in the course is just so much more in depth, and it really walks you through every step of the way. How do you get an ADHD diagnosis? How do you understand what's going wrong in your marriage or with your parent-child relationships or your child-sibling relationships? How do you get an IEP or a 504 plan for your kid? How do you figure out what your child's ADHD brain looks like and what school accommodations you should get in place as a result? All of those things, which you will have to go through as a parent or other caregiver, we go through and walk you through step by step.
It's also, by the way, if I can interrupt here for a split second.
Yeah.
It's also a great model of what to expect from professionals. You're hearing from people, a school psychologist who really knows what she's doing and talks the way that you would expect a professional school psychologist to talk, a diagnostician and tester who is totally on top of her game and can show you what a diagnostician and tester should sound like if you were to employ one yourself. So these experts really sort of show you, model for you what you should expect from these kinds of professionals as you go through the process of raising a child with ADHD and you come into contact with these professionals. And you can say, does this person sound an awful lot like Dr. Sarah Allen? Because if she does, then that's a good person.
Right. That's a huge piece because, one of the things that we'll talk about later is our coaching program. But for a lot of you, you're probably already interacting with some specialist, and you're asking yourself, does this person really know what they're talking about? Is this person worth the money that I'm paying for them? And so being able to see what we're presenting here is a great measuring stick for you to understand, like, okay, I'm actually investing in the right person here. So I want to talk a little bit about the overall trend of why digital resources are becoming so important for people with ADHD. So the first thing you have to understand is that this is a very recent phenomenon. This is not something that has been happening for a very long time. So here's the Google trend for the search term ADHD over the past 5 years, right? You can see in the last 6 months, it's reached 100% multiple times. So that means people over the past 5 years have been concentrating on finding ADHD resources online because they're struggling with whatever it is. And whoever they have access to in person is just not cutting it, right? So they have to turn online, they search ADHD, and then they find whatever comes from that, whether it's an online course, whether it's a webinar, whether it's a blog, whether it's an ebook, whatever it is, they're looking for online resources to teach them about what they're struggling with ADHD. So I have done tons and tons of market research on this. I mean, literally interviewed hundreds of parents, teachers, and other caregivers that are struggling with ADHD in middle school. Here are some of the things that I've heard. I struggle with him not listening to me. He denies that he has a problem. This is by far the most common thing that I hear. Parents, suspect that something's wrong or know that their child has an ADHD diagnosis, but their child does not want to accept that that's the reality. And so it's very difficult for them to help their child in any way whatsoever because they don't know how to talk to their child about feeling good about their ADHD diagnosis and wanting to buy in to getting help or helping themselves. They know that they're suffering. They know it's not like it's not obvious. And Dan and I have talked about this. Maybe Dan, actually, can you elaborate a little bit more? They know that they're getting bad grades. They know that they're having trouble with social life at school, but they're feeling a lack of confidence about it enough that they don't want to accept that it's a problem, because if they do, they're scared, right? They're afraid that that's going to change their lives forever. So tell us a little bit about how parents can talk about denial.
Well, that's the problem you're speaking of. The problem that you're talking about is actually not common among kids who are younger than middle school. You get 4-year-olds, 5-year-olds, elementary school kids. They mostly are pretty accepting of what their parents say is in terms of medical advice. You're talking about a problem here with middle and high school kids who have, and there's a number of reasons why they could have this problem. I want to start off by saying that if you haven't gotten the diagnosis yet of ADHD, in other words, if you suspect your child has ADHD, but you haven't actually gotten a diagnosis, don't use the term ADHD in talking to your child about your suspicions. Say, it's clear that you're having these problems with grades in school. It's clear that we're having a lot of fights at home. Let's go to somebody and have a few tests done and see if there's something very simple that explains this problem. So that you're not predisposing them or making them think that you think they have this. So then when you actually get the diagnosis, and this is, again, we're talking about a kid who has not yet been diagnosed. When you get the diagnosis from the doctor, the psychiatrist, the psychologist, whoever gives it, use that person to help you to explain to your child what the diagnosis is, because that person has a lot of experience in this area. The psychologist who makes the diagnosis has diagnosed hundreds of kids in middle school. And so she can sit down with your child and you and say, look, here's the data. Here's how you did on this test. Here's how you did on this test. This is the name for what you have. And this is what will help. Mm-hmm. Right? So you don't have to do this as a parent all by yourself. A lot of the parents do a lot of heavy lifting that they don't have to do all by themselves. Sometimes they can use the teacher. Sometimes they can use a psychologist. In this case, you should use the diagnostician. All right, that person can help you. So let's take that aside for a second and say that you actually do have a student who has been diagnosed and has ADHD and doesn't want to accept that. Mm-hmm. Your first job is to figure out why, because there could be a large number of reasons. By far the most common is this feeling that they will be labeled with a disability for life and become less popular or become, it's one of those kids who's weird and nobody wants to be friends with them, and they'll feel awkward about leaving the classroom to take an untimed test in another place, for instance, or being forced to sit in the front of the room all the time, and they don't want that. They'd rather just deny the problem. And that is a tricky situation because that's a legit fear from the middle school or high school kid, all right? But what you have to point out to these students is that this is the way. The word ADHD, the diagnosis ADHD, is the way to get to the services and medications that will help all of the problems that they are having, right? In other words, and you have to say that you're not going to label them. This is not. Wouldn't it be much worse? Let's put it this way. Wouldn't it be much worse to have the label lazy and stupid? I mean, that's not the label you want, right? So if you want your school and your friends and your parents to think of you in a certain way, wouldn't it be better that they thought of you as my brain works differently than I'm an idiot, right? And so essentially, you can talk to your kid and say, this is a label, yes, but it's a label that's going to see you safely through the harbors through middle school and through high school. And guess what? When you get out into the real world, this label is not going to matter at all, and nobody's going to know about it. Nobody's even going to care about it. Do you suppose anybody who interviewed me for the hundreds of, for the jobs that I've held, or the schools that I've been to, anybody who interviewed me at Columbia, anybody who interviewed me at Bank Street, or anybody who interviewed me at the schools I've worked at said, uh-oh, you think you have ADHD? No. Once you get the job market, once you hit the real world, it's a blessing and a curse in different ways, just as, naturally curly hair would be. And so basically you have to convince your student that they are become comfortable with the diagnosis. And the way you do that, by the way, the most important thing you can do to teach your child to be comfortable with the diagnosis is to be comfortable with the diagnosis yourself. Yeah. So that means that you are talking to your student as your child as somebody who says, this is no big deal. This is going to get you the services that you need. And we don't feel that this locks you into any kind of label. I could talk a little more about this, but it would take me several hours.
No, absolutely. So I think that's the point to highlight, though, is that there's so much negative stigma, and yet these are things that everybody goes through. Like I said, right? So here are some other quotes from the market research. I want to know how to get her tested. I want someone to give me recommendations, go to the doctor, get the paperwork, put a 504 IEP in place, and have the school psychologist actually help. These are all word-for-word quotes that I have heard from people on phone interviews with them. So, I mean, it literally could not align we built our program around this market research. I want to know how his brain works so when he is having a meltdown, I can understand and help him. Things aren't great at home. I want access to a therapist or someone who can help with the family. None of her teachers would listen. They just kept piling on the work. I definitely had major fears about Ryan succeeding in life. Ever have any friends? Ever have a normal life? I'm afraid that I'm going to have to help him with his homework for the rest of my life. Right? These are things that real people with kids.
As if your child is going to have homework for the rest of your life.
Right. Right. That's a great point to highlight, right? Because these are legitimate fears that they have,
right?
Because it's so strong, right? It's so overwhelming that they actually think like I might have to homeschool them for the rest of my life. I don't know if they're ever going to be able to be independent, and that's a legitimate fear for parents to have, and the fact that they still have them means that there aren't the online resources available for them to solve those problems.
Yep.
So,
I would also just caution all parents, never confuse school with life. School is a part of life, and a part of life that is particularly poorly suited to students with executive function or ADHD situations. So, just think when she's 23, she's going to be fine, because probably that's the case.
Yeah. So I just want to bring that all up because you are all very lucky to be pioneers at the forefront of equal access to resources on ADHD, right? This is the first time ever where the right technology, smart and tech-savvy experts, and legitimized online resources have all come together. Now, with a live broadcast like this one, or a high-quality camera and easy-to-use online course software, it's possible for anyone with an internet connection to get access to a world-renowned psychiatrist or clinical psychologist or neuropsychologist and pick their brain at a fraction of the cost, right? A single in-person consultation alone would normally cost hundreds and hundreds of dollars. But now it's possible to capture and simplify very complex information, package it into little bite-sized pieces that anyone can act on, and create a support system online for anyone to be able to learn from or help anyone else in a way that actually gets you results. And that's amazing, right? So all of this is to show you that once I started learning directly from experts on ADHD, I didn't have to spend hours second guessing my decision or sifting through misinformation or fearing that I'd regret my decisions, right? I would just implement the strategies and instantly get positive results that dramatically improve my life and the lives of the people that I care most about, right? So don't waste any more of your time. Learn directly from the people who know what they're doing, have proven that they know what they're doing, with a track record of years and years of helping hundreds of families, and save yourself the time and the struggle and the stress of using stuff that you have no idea the legitimacy to, that is going to waste your time pointing you in a bunch of different directions instead of giving you the clear and direct actions for you to follow. All right. So now I want to introduce the presentation that Mr. Daniel Kramarsky has prepared for us today. Dan, can you please go ahead and share your screen with us on Skype?
All right, let's see if I can do this. It's the hardest part of the whole thing for me. So, let me just figure out how I'm going to do that.
No worries. We'll work through it.
Okay, so I'm going to go share screen. Let's share this. Okay, how are we doing?
We're good.
Okay.
Ready to go.
So shall I just get started, Adrien?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right, I'd like to talk to you today at some length about how to get your child's homeroom teacher or advisor on your side, by which I mean turning into the kind of person who is going to say behind closed doors, yes, let's give this family what they want. Yes, let's give this student the IEP, 504, accommodations, interventions that they need. But more than that, I'm going to explain that teacher has other responsibilities that are as important, if not more important, than getting you these services that you need. So let me just get started here. I'm not going to, by the way, talk about how to do this the whole school year long, because it would take me for hours and hours. But I'm going to start with the first few days and weeks of school and how to begin this process. I'll talk a lot more about this in the course. So first, I want to say that I'm not going to tell you some tips and tricks to get this to happen. I don't mind tips and tricks. I love tips and tricks, and I've used them with my own daughters. But I don't want to talk about them here, because here I want to talk about, let me tell you why. First of all, let's say you go to a conference, a national conference about attention deficit disorder, and you say, who here, you're faced with 200 parents, 300 parents, who here has tried a token economy? All right, raise your hands. They all raise their hands. Who here has tried homework stations? Okay. Who here has tried reorganizing the plan book in the way that such and such a person suggests? Okay, we've tried it. And then you say, if that really worked for you and totally changed your child's life, keep your hand up. And about 70% of the hands go down. 50%, 70%. Because these tips and tricks work sometimes for some kids if they have a certain kind of situation, and sometimes they're life-changing. But most of the time, you try a token economy for a couple of months and you go, oh, that's just not working for us. That doesn't work for my family. The stickers, it just doesn't work. Or you try the homework stations and then you let them go after a while. I don't want to do that. I don't want to teach you 20%, 30% strategies. What I'm going to teach you today is going to work 90% of the time, close to 100% of the time, and I'll tell you what to do in those rare occasions when it doesn't. And the other problem that I have with tips and tricks has been just mentioned by Adrien. They are widely available. They're all over the internet. You can Google and helping ADHD kids with homework, and you will stumble upon all of them. You will not necessarily get the best ones that we talked about in the summit, that it was a great presentation on homework help, but you'll certainly get some, and some of them will work some of the time. I don't want to go that route. Right? I want to give you something you're not going to get from anybody else. So if I don't want to tell you about tips and tricks, what do I want to talk about? I want to talk about strategies and attitudes. What do I mean by that? By strategy, I mean strategy in the sense that it comes from a chess game. Let's imagine that you are talking about a chess game. A chess game has only two kinds of moves. There are only two kinds of moves in a chess game. One of them is the kind of move that instantly wins you a piece of material from your opponent or the game, checkmate, or else it will quickly do that. In other words, there's a move, then your opponent has to make another move, and then there's a move, and your opponent has to make another move, then checkmate. That's called a tactic. Those are tactics. But for the most part, tactical situations don't arise all that often. A tactic might be for ADHD, something you could do in the middle of a temper tantrum to get it to stop right away. That's a tactic. But most of the game is played with strategic moves, where you don't know exactly what's going to happen, but you make a move that's going to be good in a large variety of situations. It's going to deep move that's going to change the long game. In other words, you move a knight from the edge of the board to the middle. That knight is going to look good in the middle all the way through the game. All the way through the game, you're going to be happier that you had that knight in the middle than you had it on the edge. All right, a deep move that changes the entire game. And I want to talk about attitude. Attitude is simply your emotional stance, how you feel about things, right? And your attitude is, I'm going to hit this, your attitude is easy to read. A deep move that changes the whole game is very hard to read. Even a master might not be able to tell you why he moved that knight over there. All right, that he just knows that it's going to change the whole game, but why exactly it works, how it works, very hard to say. But, and this is important for ADHD kids with ADHD, and parents with ADHD, most people in the helping professions, teachers and administrators and school people, they can read your emotional stance very quickly because they do that professionally. So how you feel about this is going to be something that's easy to read from the person you're talking to, and you have to come at it feeling the right way. I know it's hard to change your feelings. I'm going to talk to you a little bit how to do that, but you have to come at it the right way, just in the same way that your kid will read if you're being sarcastic with them or sincere. All right? So I'm going to start with parent night. And it's the very first time that you would go to a school, and before the school even starts, sometimes they have parent night. Parent night, the principal gives a speech. Maybe you meet your child's homeroom teacher or advisor, and they give you a presentation. You're going to parent night. So is your partner. Why are you doing that? You're going to parent night because it shows demonstrated interest. A demonstrated interest is actually a term that you're not going to come up against until you apply your kid to college. And colleges, elite colleges, like to see demonstrated interest. That is, they like to see that if the college is in Connecticut, wherever you live, you go to Connecticut and you go to that college and you're visiting day and you shake hands with the dean and you say, here I am. If the college sends somebody to your city, you go there, wherever it is in your city, and you shake hands with the person and you say, here I am. Colleges, elite colleges like that a lot. They call it demonstrated interest. Well, schools like it too. When you're at parent night, first impression, your homeroom teacher, child's homeroom teacher or advisor is going to see that you're there and your partner is there. Even if your partner's an emergency room surgeon, she's there. However busy she is, she comes to parent night and she sits down and you sit down with that and listen to that teacher's presentation. Now, the head of school is going to tell you something on parent night. They're going to tell you this. Your child's homeroom teacher or advisor is the point person. See that person first. They mean it. They're not lying to you. They really mean that that's the point person, that you should always see that person first. And that's a strategic move if you do that. I'll explain that later. But I want to explain first that it can be counterintuitive. So parents, listen up here. If your child is having a problem in math, the right thing to do is to go see the math teacher, right? Wrong. The right thing to do is to see that point person first and then see if you have to see the math teacher. If your child is having some difficulty with services that you want them to have, you go to the school learning specialist or psychologist, right? Wrong. You go to that point person first. And I'm going to explain why. To explain why, you have to know why that point person exists. And there are three reasons. A student-centered reason that everybody will tell you, a teacher-centered reason that nobody will tell you, and an administrative reason that they may have forgotten already. Many schools don't even remember that this exists. So let me start with the student-centered reason. Middle school is different from elementary school because it is highly departmentalized. That is to say, you have a whole bunch of different teachers for a whole bunch of different subjects. Whereas in elementary school, you sat in one room and your elementary school teacher taught all the kids everything, pretty much. You might have had a specialist, you might have had two, there might have been a different person teaching PE, but essentially your homeroom teacher taught you everything. Then you get to middle school. You have an English teacher, a math teacher, a science teacher, a history teacher, a PE teacher, an art teacher, a foreign language teacher. For a child with ADHD, this is a huge problem. It's probably one of the biggest problems that happen in middle school, is that your child has to deal with a plan book that has all the different subjects and all the different teachers have different teaching styles, and the child can be driven to distraction, to use the title of a very famous book on this subject. So the school, to help the kids, puts in this idea of a point person that says, this person can sort of help you manage all of those different teachers, and you only have one person who you have to go to if you're having a problem. So it's a student-centered and a good student-centered solution, the point person. But there's also a teacher-centered reason for this. Homeroom teachers, all teachers in middle school, are fiercely protective of their classroom and the kids they consider their kids. They love their autonomy, and they hate anyone who tries to take any part of their autonomy away. If you start going in there, if the principal starts coming in there saying, look, I'll tell you a story. I was at an elite school, and they got furious at their assistant principal because their assistant principal said, I could teach any course that's being taught in the school. Even if he was right, he was foolish to say it because it got in the way. It sort of undermined the teacher's autonomy in her own room. All right? So that way, that point person idea that they talk about, that says to the teacher, we value you. You are the person who is going to be the expert here. And the teacher likes to hear that and feels stroked. Okay, so there's that reason. And you can play on that, which is what I'm about to tell you. And then there's an administrative reason, which is it sets up a chain of command. If the principal has 1,200 kids to be worried about, then when one of them has a problem in math, the principal doesn't want to see that parent in his office. There's 1,200 families or 800 families. But this sets up a way of saying, you go there first, then you go there, then you go there. So it's a bureaucracy. You can turn all of these things to your advantage. Here's how. We'll go back to parent night. Parent night is your first impression. What do? You and your domestic partner, or you alone if you're a single parent, sit down and listen to that presentation, and you take notes. You take notes? Yes, you take notes. Why do you take notes? Because it's a teacher up there, and she's in the role of teacher, and she expects her students to listen carefully and take notes. So you do what she expects you to do, what she'll be happy to see you doing. When she looks over at that desk that you're sitting at for a presentation and sees you taking notes, she's going to smile. That's what she wants to see. Then you look at your notes and you find something substantive to compliment her on. Not that you like the colors in her presentation, but rather something like, I really like the example you gave about the Pythagorean theorem. That was really cool. Or it really shows through your presentation how much you love these kids. That's great. And you say that to her when you have a chance to shake her hands and say good evening. A substantive compliment. She's going to get that from relatively few people in her presentation, but she will get that from you. Then, by the way, this is not the time to bring up your child's issues. I mentioned that because a lot of people take parent night and come up and say, my child has ADHD and she needs these sorts of, don't do that on parent night. Your homeroom teacher is already incredibly stressed. She's heard from 20 parents. She won't remember, and then you'll be mad at her for not remembering. So this is not the time to do that. Find a time when you can meet with her alone. And then the last thing you do is you nail it down. And here's how you nail it down. You nail it down just like this. I'm going to give it to you in quotes. I'm looking over at my machine now. Oh, by the way, if there's anything we can do at home to help you out, please let us know. We are here to help. That says to the teacher, we support you. We think of you as the expert. And you just nailed down that teacher. There's one more thing you can do, but you are really in the process of saying, that teacher's going to be on my side. When a problem comes up, I'm going to be able to say, and she's going to go, oh, that's the parent who complimented me on my presentation and who was ready to help me if there was anything I had a problem with. It's a deep move that changes the game. Attitudinally, it won't work unless you believe it. So get yourself in the mindset. You're there to help the teacher. You want that call, right? You want that call. You want the teacher to call you up and say, Jimmy had a lot of problems with the spelling test. Could you help him out with that at home tonight? You were going to say yes, right? That's a lot better than getting the report 3 weeks later that says Jimmy's failed the last 3 spelling tests, right? So you want that, okay? So that gives you the attitude and the strategy, and that's the beginning of how to do it. Now I'm going to talk about the first communication with that teacher, which comes about the first week or second week of school. You're going to communicate with your child's homeroom teacher. Not when there's a problem. And that first communication is going to be by phone call or note and not by email. This is a trick, by the way. It's almost a tip or a trick, but I'm going to tell you why. It's clever. Email has a subject line, and you read it and you know what it's about, and you read the email and you skip through it and you're done. If the child in your class comes in and hands you a note with your name on it, Mr. Kramarsky, here, this is from my parents, there's a moment where you go like, uh-oh, what's in this note? And what are they going to complain about? Uh-oh, it's a problem. If you get a phone call as a teacher and it says, call Adrien Harrison's parents as soon as you can, you go like, oh no, oh, here it comes. So you're set for maybe some bad news or something difficult that's going to happen. Then you open the note, or you make the phone call, and the parent says this: hi, Mrs. H, I know you're busy. I know you're busy. In other words, I respect your time as a professional. But we just wanted to mention how grateful Jimmy was that you helped him personally with the math yesterday. He really appreciated the special attention, and so do we. Thank you. Oh my God, you just nailed that teacher straight to your side. You've taken that piece from the chessboard and moved it from the black side to the white side, to the white side to the black side. You have put that teacher right in your corner now, because that teacher is going, oh yeah, I did help Jimmy with the math, and nobody else thanks me for that. Believe me, the other parents are not writing this letter. You are writing this letter, all right? And it has to be something real. Jimmy has to have told you that he was helped with the math, but it can be anything real. I like the way that, dear Mrs. H, I know you're busy, but I just wanted to mention how grateful Jimmy was that you stepped into that bullying situation the other day and called those kids out who were teasing that girl. He really thought that was great, and so do we. Thanks. I know you're busy, but I wanted to mention how grateful Jimmy was that you gave the whole class a little extra time on the spelling test because the words were so hard. We really appreciate that understanding, and so does he. So this complimentary letter, this first communication that is a compliment, that is a respectful appreciation of the teacher's expertise, is going to put that teacher on your side pretty much for the year. It's like having a bank, and you just put, on Parents' Night, you just put $2 in the bank, and now you just put another $10 in the bank, okay? So when you have to withdraw something, you're going to have the cash on hand. Again, it's a deep move. It changes the whole game. You're looking down the line for the whole year. This is going to resonate with that teacher for a long time, and you believe it. Get yourself into the mindset where you believe it. So what happens when there's an actual problem? Okay, now there's a problem. Jimmy is having some real problems with math. The math teacher is beating up on him and doesn't seem to respect the fact that he has ADHD, doesn't seem to understand, keeps asking him to shut up, or keeps asking him to stop wandering around the classroom. Or maybe you don't have a diagnosis yet and you just got one and you want to speak to the school psychologist, the learning specialist. Don't go to that person yet. Don't go to the math teacher. Go to the point person, to respect the chain of command and to give her good feelings. I know I should probably have to talk to the math teacher or the school psychologist about this, but I wanted to come to you first because you know my child best and you're the expert on this school. What do you think? Do I need to talk to the math teacher? Can you help me think about the best way to approach the school psychologist? Great. Perfect. The teacher is going to be on your side totally, because when she goes to the faculty room and the school psychologist comes up to her and says, I just met with Jimmy's parents and she doesn't know? Oh no, really? They didn't come to me? They didn't have the decency to tell me they were going to do that? What she wants to be able to say to the school psychologist is, oh yeah, Leslie, I know about that. The parents came in and told me they were going to do that. In fact, we talked about it together. That makes her feel good, and when she feels good, she's going to make you feel good. All right, so when there's a problem, you go to that point person first. And let me tell you something. When you start doing this, respecting that chain of command, respecting the teacher's professionalism, communicating compliments, I'm going to tell you a little secret about schools. Elementary school, middle school, high school teachers, they don't have a lot of power. They don't decide whether we go to war with Iran. All right, that's not what they do. But they make hundreds of small, tiny little decisions every day. Are we going to give this paper a B- or a C+? Does Jenny get to sit where she wants, or does Jenny have to sit with these other people? Do I tell Jimmy that he's late when he's 2 minutes in the door, or do I say, it's 2 minutes, come on in, Jimmy, sit down? And if the teacher is liking you, if you've done these things, all of those hundreds of little decisions will break your child's way. And if you don't do these things, you come in confrontational, you may get the exact same service as you would get otherwise, but all of those tiny little decisions are going to break the other way. And the teacher isn't even going to realize she's doing it. She's trying not to play favorites. But research has shown time and time again that the teachers can't not play favorites. They have to give sometimes something, sometimes something else. And you want those decisions to break your way. So again, strategy, attitude. This is about a deep move that will change the whole game. And this is about you believing this, by the way. You got to believe that that teacher is the first person you're going to want to come to talk to. So this does raise one question, which is the one of the last things I'll address, which is actually, something, I'll put that off for a second. The question is, what if the teacher herself is the big problem? But I'm going to talk about 2 points about attitude first. One, you want to stay away from bad mouthing of any kind when you're a middle school parent. No bad mouthing. Imagine the teacher in the class, during the class, says, we've got to cut Joe a break this week because I just met with his parents and what a horror show. I mean, Joe's surviving this horrible parents and, you'd want that teacher fired, right, if she said that to the whole class. Or imagine that a teacher was overheard in a restaurant saying bad things about you. That would not make you feel good. Or imagine a teacher who was caught in a restaurant or at a cocktail party saying bad things about your child, right? Oh, God, I have that monster in my class. My God, what a horror show. And again, you want to go to the principal and say, get this teacher out of that school. It's slightly better if your child does it, but it's still not good. You wouldn't want your child to say to your teacher, my mom hit me again, or my dad yelled at me again, or whatever. Or a child who insults you online. You discover on her Snapchat that she said that you're witches, or whatever. So if that offends you, you wouldn't tolerate that, then here are some other things not to tolerate. Don't say bad things about your child's teacher at home. It doesn't make you. It's easy to do that to make friends with your kid, but you're not your kid's friend. All right. Don't say bad things about your child's teacher in public or online. When you're at that parent cocktail party, you're sitting at the park bench with the other parents. Don't say, "Oh, Mrs. So-and-so, well, she just doesn't understand my kid at all." Just say nothing, or say, for a young teacher, I think Mrs. So-and-so is doing really well, or whatever you can do. Don't allow your child to say bad things about her teacher at home or online. During the course, I mentioned what I call the social media rule, which is whenever your fingers are near a typewriter of any kind, a keyboard of any kind, don't type anything mean about anyone ever. Right? It's no bad mouthing. Okay. You have a child, and your child has ADHD, so you know by now. You're a parent. You know by now. There are ways to talk about weaknesses without being nasty. There are ways to talk about your child's difficulty in focusing or hyperactivity or impulsivity without being insulting. So there are ways to talk about teacher weaknesses without being insulting as well. I know this must be a terrible time for you, blah, blah, blah. So, you'll figure them out. But just for now, don't badmouth. Okay, so when there's a problem, hold on. Here. Oh yeah, I want to get to this one first. Sorry about that. 2, remember the game called telephone. We played telephone when you were kids. You whisper this, and then you whisper something to somebody else. They whisper something to the next person. They whisper something to the next. Remember that game. You are hearing from what happened at school from your child. Your child saw something. They actually heard it. They bring it home to you. You are not a first-hand observer. You were not in the classroom. Ask your child, oh, Mrs. So-and-so was mean to you? If she was here right now, what would she say? What would she say? What was her side of the story? Not only will that get you into a conversation with your child that doesn't focus on how horrible the teacher is, which is not what you want to focus on, but it builds empathy in your child and builds what they call metacognitive skills, right? Which is, the ability of your child to step outside of their skin and take a 3,000 feet view and say, oh, this is happening, okay, so to have that talk with your child rather than going straight to, agreeing with them that their teacher was horrible. Remember the game of telephone. This is a second or third hand thing. I could give you example after example where that has a problem. Okay, so what happens when, what happens when the point person is the problem? That's a big deal, right? You don't want to go to that person because they are the problem. They are the person that homeroom teacher or advisor is the person who is being mean to your kid or is denying them the services, or the IEP says this and it. You go with them anyway. You go meet with them anyway. Why? Because you respect the chain of command anyway. You're going to give that teacher a chance to change before you go over his or her head. Okay? You're going to do it twice. I'm going to tell you a story I just heard the other day. New story, but it's going in my repertoire. And it's definitely going in my repertoire of stories. I had lunch with the head of school of a very famous, very prestigious school near Washington, D.C. And he told me this. He said, I have a kid who was in 8th grade last year. Pardon me, in high school last year. The kid is now in college, freshman in college. In high school last year. And I went in to talk to his advisor. This is the head of the school talking to his own child's advisor. He said, and I realized that that person had not read my kid's learning plan, had not read my kid's IEP at all. Just didn't even know it was there. Now, that's stunning to me as a teacher. Like, could you imagine that your boss walks in, it's your boss's kid, and you haven't read the thing? I mean, so the head of school said, well, so I said, I'd really like to talk about this. It looks like you were too busy to have read this. Let's talk about it next week, and I'm going to come in and we're going to talk about it. Now, then he did something that you can't do as a parent. Then he walked straight into the head of the upper school's office and said, we need to talk about this teacher. You don't get to do that. You're just a parent. But you get to do the first thing. You get to say, oh, okay, you know something? My child thinks that, my child seems to think that this is going on in the classroom and he doesn't like it's not good for him. Can we meet in a week and figure out what whether the strategies are going to work on this? This is the way you do it. You identify the problem. Okay? My child thinks that seems to not be able to sit for the preferential seating that he's been given. All right? You present the data. By the way, here's the report that shows that the preferential seating is indicated. Here's the IEP. Here's the 504. You set a benchmark. Let's see whether we can get this fixed by next week, okay? Because we know it's tough, and you've got so many things on your mind, and it's hard to remember that my kid needs this particular seat. But he's going to come up to you really nicely and tell you. She's going to come up to you really nicely and tell you that she needs it. And let's see if by next week we can get this done. And let's meet next week, check out. 9 times out of 10, this will work. So to recap, here's what you need to do. Substantive compliment on parent night. Your first communication, the first communication is a thank you for doing something great. The point person is always the first person to know and has all the data. No bad mouthing. And your attitude, the way you feel about it, is respectful and supportive. Now, that's the way to nail down for the first 3 or 4 weeks of school, getting your homeroom teacher on your side. If you do what I tell you to, this will not be a tip or trick that works 20% of the time. This will work 90% of the time. And let me tell you how I know. Because I gave this presentation, this kind of presentation, the other way around to teachers so many times. I used to tell teachers the first week of school, call the parents and say, it's your child's homeroom teacher, call me. And then the parents go, uh-oh, something bad happened. And they call you, and you, the teacher, say to them, I just wanted to tell you about this amazing comment that Adrien made in class the other day. It really blew me away. It's a pleasure to have him in the class. And then the parents go, oh, thank God, right? And they're on your side. They're on your teacher's side. The teacher he didn't play them because the teacher just actually believes that, okay? All she did was said something that she actually believed that she wouldn't normally say. She wouldn't normally make that complimentary call. She would just allow the fact that this kid was great in class to go along without any notice. But if you do that, the parents become on your side. And if you do that in the other way around, the teacher becomes on your side. By the way, the story I just told you about the head of school in Washington, near Washington, he told me that story when I was telling him about this presentation that I'm just done. And he said, wow, every parent, whether their kid has ADHD or not, should hear that and should do that. All right? So do that. 90% of the parents in the class won't compliment the teacher in the first week. You will, and you have secured yourself a place, a berth in the parents we like pantheon. Right? And it's those parents who, when the doors are closed and the teacher goes into the meeting with the psychologist and the head of school and the learning disabilities person and says, what about Jane? They all go, Jane gets whatever she wants. Her parents are so great. And that's what you want to go for. Now, in the course, I talk a little bit more about this in greater depth. I talk about an analogy that you can use to another professional, another profession that actually is going to make it even more powerful. The sense of the school as knowing you as respectful and supportive. I go through more of the school year, but this will set you on the right track and this will work. So please use this. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, Dan. So I definitely have a couple of follow-up questions for you. And here, I'm going to share my screen again here. Hold on one second. All right. I think everyone can see my screen correctly here. All right. So just a follow-up question for you, Dan. I know a lot of parents listening are probably thinking to themselves, I hate my teacher, or I hate my child's teacher, I hate my child's school head. They're so mean to my kid. They do all these horrible things. There's no way ever that I'm going to brown nose them and be nice and whatever. There's just no way. So I want you to compare and contrast what it looks like for the parents who aren't great to the school, right? This is something that we talked about in the past. What happens for every one of those decisions when it doesn't break that kid's way? Or the school has to make a decision, do we want to keep this family at our school? How is it affecting the other parents? How is it affecting the overall standard here? Because I think, it's easy to say this is the way that you should act. It's very hard to act that way. And I think parents need to understand what the alternative is in order to see why this is so worth it, as opposed to going the way that they have been.
Well, look, I said that teachers are concerned with autonomy, and so are principals, so are school psychologists, so is everybody. And the worst thing that you can do is threaten them. The worst thing you can do is threaten them. So if you come in with a threat, it might even work. You say I'm going to bring my attorney in, and we're gonna get these services. Okay, you'll get the services, all right. But all those 200 little decisions that the teacher makes every day, they're not going to break your kid's way. The other problem with that attitude that you describe, Adrien, is that well, let me tell you about let me tell you a little quickly. I don't have a ton of time, but let me tell you quickly about one of the lessons that I used to give at Columbia Teachers College when I was teaching master's candidates in education. I used to say, imagine a parent conference that worked like this. Imagine a parent conference where the kid goes in, the parents go in, the teacher's there, and because there's a problem, okay, the dean or somebody like that is also there, the person who supervises the teacher. And the parents go in, and the first thing that the parents say is this. Imagine this. It'll never happen. You'll never have it. But imagine it does. The parents say, we just wanted to say we're sorry that we haven't really, pushed hard enough at home with Daniel. We know he's been doing badly in mathematics, but we really haven't pushed too hard with him, and we're going to do better. Here's our plan for how to get a little bit better on these things. And the math teacher then breaks in the middle, sort of interrupts and says, like, no, listen to me. I'm sorry. I have really failed to understand how Daniel learns math. And I've made the following possibilities to, I've changed my strategy this way. And next semester, I'm going to go at it like this, in this new way. I hope it's better for Daniel, and we'll work together. And then the math department head, who's there because there's a problem, says, hold on a second, don't be so quick to blame Mrs. L, because you know something, I'm sorry too, and I should have been supervising her. I should have been in that math classroom 2 or 3 times this year, and I wasn't. And next semester, I'm going to be in at least once a month to watch her specifically with Daniel and see that it gets through. Then Daniel gets to talk. What does he say? The only thing that's been modeled for him is, I'm sorry, it's my fault. So he has to say, he has no place to go intellectually. He has to say, you know something, I haven't been doing the homework and I haven't been studying for the math tests, and I'm going to do better next semester, and here's how it is. Everything you do, every attitude that you take, you model for your child. How do you want your child to solve differences when he or she grows up or goes to high school or is capable of self-advocating and solving difficulties on his own? Adrien, a while ago, I used to use a line. Ages ago, I used to use a line that was taught to me by a middle school head at a prominent girls' school. She used to say to parents, I'll believe only half the things I hear about you if you believe only half the things you hear about me. All right? And that was a joke, and I used to use it until one year, a couple of parents came up to me after my presentation and said, Mr. Kramarsky, we will believe 100% of what our child says. And I was like, oh, these parents are going to be a problem. And these parents are going to be a problem because these parents are not going to trust me, and they're going to leave their child over me. And I was very upset with them. So you really don't want to do this. I mean, it's not brown-nosing to say, we appreciate that your job is hard. It's an appreciation that that teacher's job is very hard, and you could not do it. All right? Despite the fact that everybody thinks they can be a teacher, they could not be. So that's why I talk about attitude. I urge you to have an attitude that models for your child how you want. You all know this, right? Your parents all know this. Abused children grow up to be abusive parents. The literature is clear on this. Physically abused children grow up to be physically abusive to their own children. Psychologically abused children, bullies, grow up to bully their own children. You start with a negative attitude about the teacher that you picked up from a game of telephone that you heard from your kid, and your child becomes somebody who has a negative attitude about authority. And who's the main authority in your child's life? You are. You don't want to model that negative attitude towards the authority.
Yep. Perfect. Okay, so for everyone, I just want to explain. You just learned something very, very important and useful from Dan on a webinar, right? It's a live Q&A. How would you like to learn directly from over 20 world-class ADHD experts and 5 specialized instructors? You saw the results that you can get from about an hour on a live Q&A, right? So this is our special offer for today. We've got 5 world-class ADHD experts and 20 ADHD expert speakers that will walk you through the middle school years, right? And that's in what we are calling the ADHD in Middle School online course. It is by far the #1 most comprehensive walkthrough guide to teach you how to help your kids thrive through the middle school years. So throughout my journey exploring online resources for ADHD, I've been honored to learn from some of the best in the world. And just as they have had an incredible impact on the way that I do things, they will change the way that you think and act too. These world-class experts on ADHD have the best tips, tools, and strategies to help you and your child through middle school. Now, each of these speakers or instructors would normally charge consulting rates of $300 to $1,000 an hour. And we say this to you not to impress you, but to show you the value of what they will share with you, right? And they're ready to help you move forward on your journey through the middle school years, whether you are a parent, teacher, or other caregiver of a child with ADHD. Then you need to be able to understand that child, help them when things get tough, and guide them enough for them to stand on their own. So let our expert instructors walk you through the challenges of the middle school years step by step, and let our over 20 expert speakers lend a helping hand to you along the way. It will give you the blueprint and the tools that you need to finally start having a better relationship with ADHD and your family so that your child can thrive both in school and at home. So what's in this? So the first thing are these 5 in-depth walkthrough lessons, right? So Miss Melissa Orlov, again, world leader in how ADHD affects relationships, the founder of ADHDmarriage.com, award-winning author. She teaches couples, therapists, counselors, and coaches about how ADHD impacts relationships and offers private counseling to couples who wish to improve their ADHD-impacted relationships. She's going to be teaching.
I should just mention here that Melissa Orloff is concerned with ADHD parents, where one parent has ADHD and one doesn't, and ADHD is hereditary. So if your child has it, one of the parents probably does have ADHD and would benefit tremendously from what Melissa Orloff has to say. And
so many of them actually don't even know, right? So even in her case, she was having trouble with her husband because they had all these kinds of parenting differences. They weren't communicating properly. There was all the symptoms of ADHD that were impacting their relationship. And he didn't know that he had ADHD until she had brought it up, way later. And then finally he got diagnosed and they found out that he has ADHD and that one of their kids also has ADHD, right? And that completely changed how they approach the problem solving in their relationship. So she's going to be teaching you how to maintain strong family relationships while coping with ADHD through the middle school years. Next, we have Dr. Conchetta DiCaria. She is a legendary clinical neuropsychologist with a specialization in children and adolescents, who's provided academic and cognitive remediation, psychotherapeutic support, and evaluation services to hundreds of individuals with difficulties in learning, attention and regulation, behavior, social and emotional functioning since 1997. She'll explain everything there is to know about diagnosing ADHD, as well as any other comorbid conditions, how they come into play, and how the results of these tests help students get the support and accommodations that they need. Next, we have Mr. Daniel Kramarsky, which you just heard from, right? Teacher, administrator, and parent with ADHD, as well as a career in education of over 30 years. He has taught teachers at Columbia University Teachers College and presented his work internationally at conferences on ethics and philosophy of education. He and his daughter, now a student at a top-notch university, both have ADHD. As your lead instructor and an insider with expertise on what happens in schools and families impacted by ADHD, he'll be teaching you the most important things you need to know about ADHD during the middle school years and how to handle the toughest challenges that you will face. Next, we have Dr. Sarah Wheeler. She's a special education teacher, counselor, and school psychologist for over a decade. She specializes in helping children who are struggling to learn, socialize, or navigate their emotional world, especially children with learning disabilities, ADHD, and autism. And she will teach you everything that you need to know about school accommodations and the role of a school psychologist when it comes to helping your child with ADHD. Lastly, as our specialized instructor, we have Dr. Sarah Allen. She's a certified brain injury specialist, the executive director of neuropsychology at Brain Behavior Bridge, and an adjunct faculty member at Drexel University. She's also a consulting neuropsychologist for Wiseman Children's Hospital and consults for districts all over the state of New Jersey regarding brain-based program designs for public and private schools. She conducts research, teaching, and clinical neuropsychological assessments with a focus on neuroeducational programming for children in school. Now, she's going to help you gain a better understanding of the ADHD brain and how your child's unique ADHD profile will help inform which accommodations that you should get in place for them. Now, we spent months and months and months looking for the perfect instructors for these programs. So all of these people know exactly what they're talking about. They know all the problems that we've uncovered through market research, and they know how to solve them, right? That's just in the walkthrough lessons. What do we have next? We have everything that comes with the ADHD in Middle School Summit, right? So first and foremost, that's over 20 video masterclass sessions, right? That means you get lifetime access to 20 in-depth expert video sessions. That's over 25 hours of content with world-class ADHD experts, including Dr. Edward Ned Hollowell, who's a world-renowned speaker and New York Times bestselling author of over 20 books on ADHD, Dr. Peg Dawson, prolific bestselling author and leading authority in the field of ADHD, Elaine Taylor-Klaus, and Diane Dempster, the co-founders of one of the most successful blogs on ADHD, ImpactADHD.com. Cindy Goldrich, the founder of PTScoaching.com, award-winning author and mental health counselor, board-certified ADHD coach, who provides education, coaching, and support for parents, educators, and mental health professionals to help children with ADHD and executive function deficits find success. And that's on top of the 17 other world-class leaders and experts in the field of ADHD. So you can watch all of these masterclasses from the comfort of your own home and implement the step-by-step strategies and blueprints for helping your middle school age child with ADHD at your own pace, right? Next, we have the audio downloads of all the in-depth walkthrough lessons and masterclass sessions, right? So that's valued at $1,131, right? If you want to learn on the go, we took each of the 5 in-depth walkthrough lessons and the 20+ expert video sessions and turned them into audio versions in a downloadable MP3 audio format for your convenience. That's over 39 hours of actionable training, so you can download them to your phone, iPod, iPad, or computer and listen to them wherever you want. On your commute, in the car, at the gym, on the go, anytime, anywhere. With this resource, you've got no excuses to miss out on valuable content. Next, we have the session notes, handouts, and action guides, right? So do you want to get the key steps and strategies without having to watch 25+ hours of expert sessions, or to use it as a complement as you're watching the sessions? Are you worried that you won't be able to keep track of your progress and get things done? No problem. With 20+ pages of session notes, handouts, and action guides summarizing the most important tips, strategies, and actions for you to take, including resources and links from our world-class expert sessions, you'll be implementing the content in no time. There's literally a revolutionary strategy on every single page. Then we have the members only VIP Q&As, just like this one, but with other experts. Access to Smart Courses ADHD expert community, and access to the ADHD in middle school online course community. So what's special about this, right? When we were talking about Facebook groups at the beginning of this presentation, I was telling you it's filled with people who are largely venting, but you're not going to get very actionable strategies out of those. Here's what sets us apart. Every single person that's a part of these groups has paid to be a part of these groups. They're all invested in helping their kid. They're not there to vent. They're there to exchange strategies, ask questions, get answers. And here's the best part. Every single one of our experts, instructors, are in these groups. So if you want to ask a specific question to Melissa Orloff, to Dan Kramarsky, to Dr. Conchetta DeCaria, Dr. Sarah Allen, Dr. Sarah Wheeler, for whatever specific part of the module that you don't understand, that's what they're there for. So for every couple of months, we're going to be hosting a live Q&A together with me and another expert like Mr. Dan Kramarsky, where you get to ask any questions you have about the expert sessions or ADHD in middle school. And these sessions are meant to highlight the key focus points from each expert session with actionable tips on how you can implement them, right? Next, you get that access to our 2 exclusive groups with ADHD experts and your peers, so you can ask questions about the different lessons, clarify your thinking, and get support from myself, Mr. Daniel Kramarsky, or other course instructors, as well as your fellow students who are going the same material as you. So they'll be able to relate with you on your level. Next, we've got the ADHD in middle school online course deals, exclusive bonus resources, discounted premium courses, training, more VIP Q&As, access to our coaching program, and much, much more, right? So you know that you're going to need to help your kids through the middle school years, right? But do you have the right tools and resources to get started? I partnered up with some of my favorite companies and speakers, and they decided to offer people who upgrade to the ADHD in middle school online course special deals and discounts that you can't find anywhere else to their own programs, right? Plus, you'll have the chance to get early access to our own exclusive deals. Join our coaching program if you're looking for direct video call support from our instructors, who will host their own live Q&A sessions to answer any questions that you have about the course. So here's a list of some of the deals that we've got for you. Cindy Goldrich is offering her Common Connected workshop at a discounted price. You get a parenting workshop with Andrea Elrome. You get more live Q&As with Dan Kramarsky. You get access to our coaching program with direct access to instructors, just like if you were FaceTiming them on a group coaching call. You get an ADHD marriage workshop with Melissa Orlov. You get a live Q&A with Dr. Sharon Celine, leading expert on ADHD parenting, as well as a clinical psychologist. You get over 60% off your first course from us at Smart Course, and access to exclusive deals from our sponsors, right? So all of that together today, total value of $17,319. But if you get it today, you save over 95% of the full value price. That's insane. And we're definitely not going to be doing this deal again. But that just goes to show how much value we're putting up for you right now, because we're just excited to finally get this out there, right? So I want to recap. Here's what you get by upgrading today. Lifetime on-demand access to all 20-plus expert video masterclass sessions, 39-plus hours of downloadable audio files for listening on the go, 20-plus session notes, handouts, and action guides. That's over 25 pages of revolutionary insights from world-class experts, providing you with shortcuts to the key steps and strategies so that you can speed up implementation whilst keeping track of your notes. Then you have access to the ADHD in middle school online course deals, exclusive bonus resources, discounted premium courses, training, VIP Q&As, access to our coaching program, and much more. You get lifetime on-demand access to all 5 in-depth instructor walkthrough lessons. You get access to both of our expert-vetted community groups, the ADHD expert community, as well as exclusive access to the AIMS online course community with your peers and instructors. And you get exclusive invites to post-event VIP Q&As with me, as well as other experts like Sarah Wheeler, Melissa Orlov, Conchetta DeCaria, and Sarah Allen, where you get to ask us anything you want in regards to ADHD in middle school, and I'll help highlight the key points and important implementation tactics for you. On top of that, you get the special deals from our other experts programs, workshops, courses, and access to our coaching program. Here's the best part. We're so confident that you'll value everything in the ADHD in middle school online course gives you that we're willing to offer you an outrageous 100% money back guarantee, right? I have no doubt in my mind that if you take this course, you're going to get so much value from it. You're good for the entire time that you're dealing with the middle school years. So I have no problem backing it with a 30-day guarantee. That means you can go through all of the content, watch every single walkthrough lesson, and still, if you decide it's not right for you after that, you can ask for a refund. As long as you didn't take advantage of our exclusive deals, that's your right. And I don't want your money if you don't get the value out of this program. So it's a win-win for both of us. So here's the special part about today, right? If you're listening live right now, the normal price for the ADHD in middle school online course is $19.97, right? But because this is our first time launching the course to the public, out of everyone listening today, the first 20 people to buy can get the entire ADHD in middle school online course and all of its exclusive bonuses for $5.97, right? That's almost 60% off. So if you're one of the first 20 people to buy the course within the next 30 minutes, starting now, and I'm going to show you our timer so that everyone's on the same page about it, you can get it for 60% off. So here's a quick recap of everything that we talked about. I'm going to put up the timer here so we're all on the same page, and then we're going to dive into the live Q&A to answer your questions. Give me 1 second here. All right. It's currently 5:35 p.m. EST, and that means this offer will be available until 6:05 p.m. EST. So there you have it. All right. Now, with that done, I want to tell you one more thing that's special about listening in live right now. So, if you're the kind of person that wants to speak directly with experts so that you can ask them the exact question that you have about your child, your individual situation, we offer a coaching program on top of the course, right? And that's for only 20 students maximum, right? So if you're one of those people who want to join a 5-week coaching program with live video question and answer sessions hosted by each expert instructor to answer any individual questions you have about the course or questions specific to you and your child, for our coaching program, you will join the course. You'll have an entire month to go through all of the course content at your own pace, and then we'll host weekly live video Q&A sessions with your lead instructor, Dan, and live video Q&A sessions with each specialized instructor. That way, it's just as if you were FaceTiming them directly, right? So if you're interested in that, you can buy the course, and you'll be presented with an option to join the coaching program with all the details. Now, the link to buy the course is below, right? If you're not on the webinar page, we'll share the link also on the screen so that you can type it in directly. All right. One second here. If you're listening on Facebook or YouTube, then you can type this link in. Let me see if everyone can see that. All right. Here we go. All right, there it is. The link is now on the screen as well. All right. So that basically sums up our offer for you today, right? If you wanted to join the coaching program, you buy the online course and you'll have the option to upgrade to the coaching program there. One second here. All right. So the normal price for the coaching program is $49.97, right? As you can imagine, direct video calls with these experts is not easy to get. In fact, it's impossible for most of them because their client list is completely full. But I convinced them to give you their time for our coaching program so that any of you could interact with them directly. And the best part is if you join the coaching program right now, before those 30 minutes run out, you can get the coaching program for $44.97. That's $500 off. And we definitely won't be doing this deal again. So ask yourself, if we've already proven our value to you, if you joined the Middle School Summit, if you watched this webinar and you found value from it, you know that you're going to need the help for the middle school years, and you know that you're easily going to spend thousands of dollars on trying out new specialists and experts for your child. So why not invest now, get it right the first time, and not have to waste any more money? All right. So all of you, while you go through that, Dan and I are going to go over some of the questions that have come in here. So Dan, the first question to answer here is, what are the differences between ADHD and executive function deficiency?
All right. Well, for our students, for parents of middle school age children, the major difference between ADHD and executive function deficiency is that executive function deficiency doesn't exist in the DSM-5. In other words, there is no such thing as a diagnosis of executive function deficiency that's legitimate, and therefore you can't get accommodations or 504 plan or an IEP because you have that. Because that probably will exist in the next iteration of the DSM-5. It's very popular right now. A lot of people have done some amazing work on it. There are still at least 4 different ways of categorizing executive function, different books by different people who different people trust. Eventually that'll be narrowed down and we'll have a standardized form, and it will go into the DSM-5. But for right now, if you suspect that your child has executive function skills deficits, which is extremely possible, it looks enough like and maps carefully enough. If you can watch Peg Dawson's video on this, it matches up with ADHD well enough that you're probably going to get a diagnosis of ADHD. You can decide to talk to your kid about it as executive function if you want, as executive function skills. You can decide to talk to your kid about it as VAST, the way that Ned Hallowell does if you want. Those are great ways to talk about it to your child. But what it's going to be on the form is not executive function deficiency, but ADHD, because that's the way you get, at least in the public schools, the services that you need.
Awesome. The next question is, are there options other than medication for treating ADHD? This is a super common question we get all the time. What's your answer? Sure. They're just not as popular or as functional. In other words, yes, look, I had ADHD in the 1960s as a child. I was not diagnosed. I was never diagnosed until I was an adult, and I coped without medication. All right. So the most common way to work without medication is through therapy and coaching strategies, which coaching will help. An ADHD coach will help you to cope with your symptomology. But as notably Dr. Ross Greene has said, the tricky part of ADHD happens when you have a child's capability is here and the school or your parental expectations are here. And there's this gap, and the problem with ADHD lies in the gap between your expectations and the child's capacity. You move your expectations this way, you close the gap. You lower your expectations or move your expectations. Medication pushes the child's capacity up. So if you choose not to use medication, you are going to have to adjust your expectations much more, right? But there are coping strategies and therapies and behavioral CBD, cognitive behavioral therapy and other such things that work better or work as well as anything that's non-medication. What I would advise against is trying untested herbal supplements or things like that don't really seem to have any solid evidence behind their working. And the other thing that I would advise against is, I would advise that parents understand that things that help all kids will help all kids with ADHD. For instance, all kids could use more sleep. So is more sleep good for ADHD? Yes, because it's good for middle school children. A diet low in refined sugar and processed foods is often recommended online for ADHD. It's great for ADHD because it's great for everybody. Who wouldn't be better off with a diet lower in processed foods and refined sugars? So you can do all those things if you want. Medication is the best way to solve the problem if you're willing to put up with the fact that nobody, not even the best psychiatrist in the world, is going to know right away what medication is right for your child, and there will be a period of months of adjusting dosages. But it will be like night and day when it works. What's the best medication or combination of medications for my child's symptoms? So this is obviously like a very individual question. How would you address it for someone? And
the answer to that question is very simple. The answer to that question is consult your prescribing psychiatrist. Anyone who gives you any answer other than that is giving you horse hockey, malarkey. Nobody knows the answer to that except your child's prescribing psychiatrist, and even she doesn't know until she's tried a bunch of different medications. Don't listen to the internet. This is like going to WebMD when you have chest pain and trying to figure out whether you have a heart attack or not by reading, comments on the WebMD. Don't do that. If you want to know what medication is best for your individual child, consult your prescribing psychiatrist.
Yeah, absolutely. I second that 100%. Anyone who's giving you any kind of medication advice for a specific individual situation needs to know your child and exactly what they're going through.
Mm-hmm.
All right, the next question is, my spouse or domestic partner does not seem to understand even the basics about ADHD. How can I help without getting into a fight?
Buy the course and have your spouse or domestic partner watch the course. Essentially, you don't want to be the one whose job it is to convince your spouse or domestic partner. Melissa Orloff will know much more about this than I could ever know. So, I really do suggest that you take a look at the course. But on the other hand, if you want an answer to that, the real answer is, if you haven't been able to do this and you're married to the person and you've been their domestic partner for many years, then you're not the right person to do this. And you need to find a therapist, family therapist, or a psychiatrist, or the school psychologist. If you have a really good school psychologist, she can talk to your husband or wife and say, this is real. If you have a really good diagnostician, like Dr. Conchetta Dicaria, she can talk to your husband or wife and say, this is real. Find an expert and get them in touch with somebody that so you would get them in touch with your husband or wife.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's pretty simple. The definition of insanity is trying the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. So if you've been trying the same thing and it's not changing or it's not helping, there's nothing wrong with asking for help from someone who's an actual professional and can solve those problems for you very quickly, relatively, right? Next question is, how can I avoid getting into fights with my child at those fight times? Mornings, homework time, dinner, and bedtime.
I'll go back once again to Ross Greene's book, The Explosive Child, or Smart But Scattered, which is another book on this. It's too late. If you reach those fight times and you're in a fight, it's too late. I do give in my summit talk and in my course talk some strategies that you can use during those fight times to pull yourself away from it. But remember, I talked about strategies and attitudes. That is a tactical moment. So you need to have done your work in advance. You need to have prepared for that fight time with your child in advance. We have a fight every morning about brushing your teeth. How are we going to solve that? Why are you having so much of a problem brushing your teeth? Explain, listen carefully. Reflective listening is useful here. Parroting back is useful here. And then you reach the time when you understand why that's happening. And then you use the expectations, you move your expectations, negotiate. Well, how would this be better? How could we make this better? I don't brush my teeth because I drink orange juice, and after I brush my teeth, the orange juice tastes horrible. Okay, so you have breakfast first and brush your teeth later. You find ways around it when your kid is calm, because when your kid is in the middle of a tantrum about it, it's just not going to work.
Yeah. Next question is, what are the best extracurricular activities for kids with ADHD?
It's all over the map. If your child is if your child's ADHD and the accommodations that she has for it cause her to need to spend huge amounts of time finishing schoolwork, then no extracurricular activities is a good idea until you reach the near the end of middle school. Before you get into high school, you want to grab at least a couple of extracurriculars, because high school groups, popularity in high school, social ability in high school tends to revolve around interest groups rather than just who's cool. All right, so the theater kids hang out together, the jocks hang out together, the cheerleaders hang out together. So you want to get your child into something. And the other thing is that if your child has hyperactivity as part of their profile, obviously you want a very physical after-school activity. My daughter did dance and gymnastics, very helpful. Exercise is very helpful in these situations. So you want to choose a physical one for anyone who has a hyperactive component, and you want to choose one or two in any event before you go to high school. But there is no best one, right? The best one is the one that internally motivates your kid. If your kid wants to do karate, don't sign her up for chess club.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Next question is, what are the differences between an IEP, 504 plan, accommodations, services, and interventions? And this is a question I get all the time as well, and it's why we recruited Dr. Sarah Wheeler. What would you say for this person?
Well, I'd say listen to Dr. Sarah Wheeler, but before, if I don't say that, I would say this. An IEP is a special education plan. It's perhaps the most sort of the gold standard. If you want the most accommodations, the most services, an IEP is the big one. To qualify for an IEP, you need to qualify for special ed, and that qualification often has to be determined by the school. And there's relatively little you can do with your outside testers and pediatricians to help that along. There's some things, and Sarah Wheeler, I'm sure, will discuss them. A 504 plan is sort of a step down, because a 504 plan comes out of a federal law, and it's much easier to qualify for a 504 than an IEP. So if you don't qualify for an IEP, you can still for a 504. Accommodations are a catch-all word for all of those things. So interventions are slightly different from accommodations in that interventions are a specific learning plans, that specific learning situations that are adjusted in the classroom. Accommodations are adjustments not to the curriculum, but to the way that the child is accommodated. For instance, preferential seating, extra time, those don't change the curriculum. Interventions are something like, my child doesn't have to take a foreign language, or my child has there's a curricular change based on what. So, by the way, accommodations and services are terms usually used by private schools. IEPs and 504s are usually the province of public schools. Private schools do not have to, by law, give your child an IEP.
Yeah. Next question is, what are the deal breakers I should fight the school for? What are my legal rights?
Well, if you're in private school, you don't have very many. If you are in public school, you are legally entitled to a 504 plan if you qualify for one, an IEP if you qualify for one. But remember my presentation today. You should almost never talk about things as your legal rights. Once upon a time, one time in my entire life, I lost a job that I really liked, and I didn't think it was right that I lost that job. But I said it, and I gave a speech afterwards to some parents who were sort of on my side, and I said, there's a difference between what someone has the right to do and the right thing to do. And this is the same thing is true with talking to schools about your legal rights. You have the right to bring up a lawyer. You have the right to talk about your legal rights. It's absolutely your right. But it's not the right thing to do, because it's going to cause all those little decisions to break against your child. So I would say know your legal rights. And by the way, one legal right that very few people know about, it just was written up today. Today, as we're doing this live session in USA Today, there is an article on special education. And it talks about how rich kids seem to get special education more easily than poor kids do. But in that article, there's actually a lot of talk about the fact that if your public school cannot accommodate you, they have to pay for private school. If your public school cannot accommodate you and says that it can't, they have to pay for you to go to another school that can. And you can ask them to pay for private school. So that is a possibility for some families. They don't seem to know that. But it's way down the line. You start off much friendlier than this, all right? But you do have legal rights, especially in a public schools. If you qualify for an IEP, they have to give it to you. And if they can't, they have to find another school that can, and they have to pay your transportation costs and tuition.
Yeah, I can't emphasize enough how many parents just don't know the details on this and are stuck, taking their school's word for it. So educate yourself as much as possible. I mean, this is something we cover in depth in our online course, even like the step-by-step on how to get that diagnosis, so that when you do go in to get those accommodations, you are actually going to get it and you don't waste your time. But yeah, absolutely. That's something that every parent should do. All right, so the next question is, what if I have more questions regarding my individual situation?
I think you covered that one, Adrien, because you were talking about the coaching situation. And I would say that, if you really want all of the experts to weigh in on your individual child, the best way to do it is to take advantage of the coaching that we offer.
Yeah, absolutely. There are tons of people who are going to have very specific situations where there are certain comorbid conditions and all kinds of other things that make it very difficult to generalize a program. So if you are someone like that and you're looking for that individualized or tailored support, then the coaching program is for you. All right, this is the last question. Or actually, no, we have a couple. We'll do a couple more. All right, so the next one is, what will I learn from your course that I can't get anywhere else on the web? It's a pretty classic question. Go ahead, Dan.
Well, I can't tell you what you'll learn from the course that you can't learn anywhere else on the web. I can tell you what you'll learn from me that you can't learn anywhere else on the web. I tend, as I said, to talk about strategies and attitudes, to talk about life-changing ways of looking at the world for you and for your child. I specifically talk about in the course the incredible freeing power of saying that you don't know something. It's very rare to hear experts talk about the incredible power of not knowing something and admitting it. There's a particular method of dealing with middle schools, as I began to outline in this course, that I outline in much greater depth in the full course. It all leads up to a way of thinking about ADHD, a way of celebrating and living with ADHD that I call the adventure of ADHD, or the opportunity of ADHD, which you're not going to get from people who talk about specific situations or how to stop people from having tantrums. We talk about that too. But what you really get, I hope for the people who get this course, that what they really will understand at the end of it is how to see their life with their child with ADHD in a different light, in a light that's clear, because the information is certainly all there in the course, but not just clear, but also a flattering light, a light that says, this is not a disorder. I'll tell you something, Adrien, and not many people know this, but up until the 1970s, different forms of sexuality were considered a disorder by the DSM. And it only happened after the 1970s that the DSM came around to understanding that that wasn't a disorder at all. That was just a difference in who you loved. That's all that was. And I think eventually, and I hope with this course we will be able to teach parents that ADHD is currently seen as a disorder, but in fact it's a brain difference. And it's a difference in how people look at the world and how people understand the world. And if you can come at it that way, you can actually celebrate it with them.
Yeah, I think Dr. Hollowell talks about this better than anyone with his new concept, VAST, which stands for Variable Attention Stimulus Trait, which is the new name that he would want to give to ADHD because it's much more inclusive and it takes into account that first of all, ADHD is just a terrible name for ADHD. Yep. And second of all, VAST would make it much more of a spectrum that someone like me who relates to so many ADHD symptoms can relate to and understand and not have that negative stigma with it. So absolutely, there's so many positives. Exactly. I mean, it's especially for like entrepreneurship, being able to have that energy, that creativity to splice so many different ideas that you're thinking about together. It's amazing.
I'm reminded of Rick Firey's presentation in the summit.
Yeah, he. So for those of you who don't know, Rick Firey is the founder and CEO of this company called Inventive Labs that specifically works with kids who have learning differences and helps them hone their skills and strengths above, any kind of neurotypical skills. And, when you can leverage those strengths, you can easily become the best at what you do. It's just a matter of understanding what those are, what your weaknesses are, and then, focusing and doubling down on those strengths. All right. Another question is, what happens when the experts seem to disagree? I think this is a great question, actually, for parents, because it could be very confusing to hear, very authoritative resources contradicting each other.
Yeah, I think that it's important to see the big picture there, because, for instance, I've mentioned before in this webinar that the differences between one conception of executive function and another. The difference between the conception of executive function, for instance, that's adopted by people at the Child Mind Institute in New York, and the difference between that and, say, Dr. Dawson's idea of what executive function is. Mm-hmm. And that's a disagreement. They don't agree on the. But it's a fight in the branches of a tree, which is one tree. Right. Everybody agrees that executive function is a forebrain intensive group of skills that have to do with organization, categorization, metacognition. There are certain things that appear in all of them. So I would say seek out the places where the experts do agree, and expect that the places where they don't agree are minor areas. In other words, if you see an area where authoritative experts disagree, it's probably not the main thing they're trying to say, right? So you should probably step back, climb down a branch, and say, okay, let's get that back down to the point where they do agree. And that's about what I would say to that. The only other thing that I would say is make sure they're both experts.
Yeah. Yeah, I was going to say, like, you can easily lean in on, each one of these, at least for our course, each one is specialized for a reason, right? Yeah. So go ahead with the person who's specialized in that area, because that's what they specialize in. That's what they do all day, every day. It's possible for, some instructors or experts, wherever, to contradict themselves just because, they heard it in passing or whatever. But I mean, just from my perspective, always go with the person who's specialized in that.
Right, and obviously make sure that everybody who you're talking about and to is an expert. Yeah. The guy down on the street who tells you he eat Tide Pods is not an expert.
Yeah. Here's another good question. How should I prioritize the different strategies from the experts? What should I do first?
Well, that sort of depends. It depends on how intrusive and difficult your child's ADHD symptomology is to your everyday life. If you're in the middle of you truly are at your wit's end, your rope's end, don't know what to do, then you do want to prioritize people who give you specific strategies and tips and tricks, like Adrien. You want to prioritize people who tell you exactly how to make it work. If the big problem that's happening is that your relationships are falling apart, then you want to prioritize somebody like Melissa Orloff. If you are, I am immodest enough to say that I think that if you're basically got a kid whose symptomology are not driving you absolutely crazy moment to moment, and you just want to get them through middle school and into high school, you should listen very carefully to what I have to say. On the other hand, if it's sort of, we have enough experts on board, Adrien, here, that you can say, this is the real problem in my house, so I'm prioritizing this person. We have 2 excellent coaches talking in the summit, and so if you need coaching, that's where you go, so.
Yeah, absolutely. And then last question. So first of all, I want to congratulate Stephanie Teal for joining the online course. Thank you so much. We look forward to seeing more from you in the Facebook groups. Last question, and then I'm going to show everyone just a quick preview of what the inside of the course looks like. And I know the timer is about to run out in the next 10 seconds, but we'll extend that deadline until this live ends. So the last question is, many of the experts talk about subjects, it's very specific, many of the experts talk about subjects, executive function, rejection sensitivity dysphoria, VAST, etc., that are not mentioned in the DSM-5 or other authoritative sources on ADHD. Can these things be diagnosed, and are they real?
All right. Let's start with, can these things be diagnosed? No. There is no diagnostic criteria for VAST. There's no diagnostic criteria for rejection sensitivity dysphoria. There's no diagnostic criteria for executive function, because these things haven't made it yet into the mainstream that is the DSM-5. I like to think of the DSM-5 as being very much like a dictionary. If you go and try and look up "Okay, Boomer," you're not going to find it anywhere. All right. And everybody says it and everybody knows what it means, but you're not going to find it in the dictionary because it hasn't been codified yet. So you have a lot of these things that exist that hasn't been decided so they can't be diagnosed. Are they real is a much tougher question. All right. The thing is that what do you mean by that? All right. I like to say that we live in an ADHD society. We live in an attention deficit world where popular songs are only 3 minutes long, and movies have 7-second cuts between scenes, and Twitter is 280 characters and nobody uses them. I mean, basically the average Twitter message is 33 characters or whatever. And so your kid is being forced into this ADHD world and then goes to school, which is a very focused place. Is that real? Yeah, that's very real. That affects your child every day, all right? But if what you mean by that is it a real disease? Is it a disability for which you can get certain services? No, they're not, all right? However, this is not true anymore. They don't say this in intro psych classes anymore. But when I did intro psychology, they used to say that personality theories were like descriptions of snow. And that if you lived in a snowy place, like the Eskimos do, you would have 60 different words for different kinds of snow. Mm-hmm. If you live in New York, you have one word, slush. Right. They're it. Yeah. Right. So, or if you're a skier, you probably have 4 or 5 different words for snow. You have 4 or 5 different words for snow for an alpine skier. Right. Different kinds of snow, packed, powder, whatever you got. And theories of what's wrong of ADHD are like that, okay? VAST, executive functions, these are ways of describing the symptomology. Currently, the only way of describing the symptomology that can be diagnosed is attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. That doesn't make the others false. If one of them works for you, use it. If it works in your house, if talking to your kid about it works better than calling it attention deficit disorder, use it. If your Uncle Harry will understand it better, talk that way to your Uncle Harry. These things are real because they describe the same symptomologies, and the symptomologies are real. However, they are not diagnosable.
Okay. Yeah. That was a great way to handle that question. It was very specific. And, for those of you who've watched the summit, you would understand these terms: rejection sensitivity dysphoria, VAST, all of that. So if you haven't yet, definitely encourage you to go through those. So now for the last people here, I want to show you what the inside of the online course looks like, just so you have an idea of what we're offering here. So here we have just the normal sales page that you'll see on Teachable. We have our own where you can see what's in the course, and then our course curriculum. Let me just get rid of this. There we go. And here you can see, right, we've got Module 1, Welcome to the Course, what you'll learn, why you should take this course, and how to structure your time for success, right? Next, what's really going on, the basics of ADHD and middle school transitions. Next is the evaluation, accommodations, medication, and your role as a parent. After that, we have Module 4, Making Middle School Work, covering grades, tests, social life, and avoiding anxiety. After that, we've got Module 5, Whether to Change Schools or Not, to evaluate school match, knowing how life will change for your child. Then we have Module 6, Parenting Your Unique Individual Case of ADHD Pre-Adolescent, how to parent with love and handle the worst case scenarios. And then Module 7 to wrap up the admission circus and high school hopes and fears. So those are all Dan's modules. After that, we go into our specific ADHD experts specialized module. The first one being Dr. Conchetta Dicaria, that covers the guide to getting an ADHD diagnosis and why it's important. As you can see, it's super comprehensive, goes through every part of that. Dr. Sarah Allen has 3 big lessons on your child's ADHD brain, how it works for school accommodations and independence. Dr. Sarah Wheeler, how to best support middle schoolers with ADHD in school. Melissa Orlov, how ADHD affects relationships with your child and spouse and how you can help. You can see all of these are multiple hours long, so they're very, very comprehensive. Here are some frequently asked questions about the course. When does the course start and finish? The course officially launched on January 19th, 2020, but you can join whenever you want and it never ends. It is completely self-paced online course. You decide when you start and when you finish. However, you will not be able to join the course at this price point ever again, right? So if you want it at the $597 price point, you have to buy it before we finish this live stream. How long do I have access to the course? How does lifetime access sound, right? After enrolling, you have unlimited access to the course for as long as you like across any and all devices you own. And what if you are unhappy with the course? We would never want you to be unhappy. We're so confident our course is valuable. We're willing to show you everything our course offers. And if you are unsatisfied with your purchase, you can contact us in the first 30 days and we will give you a full refund, right? Again, as long as you haven't taken advantage of any of the exclusive bonuses with our partners, that is your right. That means you can look at the entire course and decide if it would be valuable to you before committing to anything, right? So that's what the sales page looks like. Here's what it looks like when you're actually in the course, right? Here are all the modules. You just click start right here. And you go ahead and start watching that lesson. And that's here. I'm going to show you actually a preview, which is Dan's first lesson that tells you a little bit about the course itself. Go ahead and move these links down as well. There we go. My Wi-Fi is going very slowly here, so apologize for the slow loading time, but here we are. So you see you get your video here, and then you can just hit the play button. Just going very slowly. There we go. You got Dan talking to you. You got slides in the background that actually show you the information that you're being taught. They're all very professionally designed. It looks great. Super easy to follow. It's very difficult for you to see the video through the live stream just because it's being broadcasted, so you won't see how smoothly it's appearing for me. But that's just to give you an idea of what the course inside looks like. So to wrap up, I just want to remind everyone of the offer that we're giving today and the offers after we're done with this live Q&A. So you got 2 choices right now. You can continue the way that you have been, which is the long, difficult, and dangerous path, where you could spend tens of thousands of dollars on ineffective treatments and countless hours trying to implement old and outdated ADHD strategies that you learn from so-called experts that aren't that effective anymore, or worse, that they don't work at all and actually end up hurting your family, right? Or you can take the short, easy, and safe path that we've all vetted for you and your children, right? So you could sign up for the ADHD in Middle School online course today, right now, and get real insights from the top ADHD experts in the field and a step-by-step guide to handling the pitfalls every family has to go through coping better at home so that the house can go back to being a nice place to be. And that way you can get access to resources that you will need to help your child thrive throughout the entirety of their middle school years, right? You know you have at least 4 years to do this. So if you're looking for your average run-of-the-mill online course, you've come to the wrong place. But if you're looking for the top strategies for ADHD in middle school and the exact walkthrough lessons that are working right now, then you're in the right place, and all you have to do is join now. So I just want to say we're going to wrap up. We're going to stop this broadcast in just a minute. If you haven't upgraded yet, no worries. You can still upgrade for a highly discounted price until 11 p.m. EST tomorrow. That's Monday, February 10th at 11 p.m. EST. You can still get the online course for $697 at a one-time offer. Meaning if you visit the link that we shared with you on the screen here, that's www.adhdmiddleschool.com/online-course-oto-sales-page. You can still access the online course for $697. Once you hit that page, there will be a 30-minute countdown timer that starts, and that's to show you that that's a one-time offer. And that will only be available until 11 p.m. EST tomorrow. So if you know that you want to take this course, take advantage of it now. I can't stress this enough. We have so many people who end up waiting too long and then end up buying the course at a more expensive price when we've given them so many opportunities to do it at a cheaper price. So again, I want to congratulate the people who bought the course today. You are proactive. You got it at the best price you're ever going to get it at. And I just want to thank you for joining us. For everyone else, thank you for listening up till now. Please join the course within the next couple of hours so that you get it at a great deal. And yeah, Dan, thank you so much for spending your time. Thanks for participating in the chat, answering everybody's questions, sharing your knowledge. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we wrap up?
I thank you, Adrien, for putting this whole thing together.
All right. Well, thank you so much, everyone. Thank you for listening. Have a good rest of your weekend, and we hope to talk to you soon. All the very best.